In May 1990, Jan Cornell, a dedicated hospital employee and loving mother, entrusted her 11-year-old daughter to the care of a close friend. This was meant to be an opportunity for a rare and much-needed evening break. But when dawn broke and Jan returned home, she was met with a scene that no parent should ever endure. A brutal crime had transpired in her absence, leaving her daughter and her friend as its tragic victims. Local law enforcement mobilized, pouring every resource into the investigation. Officers scoured leads, conducted countless interviews, and canvassed the neighborhood. Yet, the perpetrator remained an elusive phantom, a faceless figure who left no easy trail. The case seemed poised to fade into the cold case files, nearly forgotten. But over 25 years later, forensic technology made an unexpected leap, igniting a renewed sense of hope. Although time had eroded some evidence and memories had grown murky, the stakes rose in a case that had long felt out of reach. Still, with new leads emerging from these technological advancements, a pressing question loomed. Could this long-awaited breakthrough finally bring justice for Jan and her community? It was a balmy, seasonably warm night with temperatures hovering around 80 degrees in Cape Coral, Florida, on May 9, 1990. For Jan Cornell, who resided in the Courtyards Apartments condominium community, that night felt like any other. Jan, a single mother of two, lived with her youngest daughter, 11-year-old Robin. She worked at Cape Coral Hospital alongside her close friend, 32-year-old Lisa Story. Earlier that day, Jan had assisted Lisa in settling into her spare room when Jan's boyfriend invited her to watch TV at his place. Lisa kindly offered to watch Robin. Around 10:30 p.m., Jan tucked Robin into bed, kissed her goodnight, and whispered, "I love you," before heading out, leaving one front door lock undone as it was malfunctioning. What was intended to be a quick visit to her boyfriend's turned into an unexpected nap on his couch, and she didn't awaken until 4 a.m., mere minutes before her hospital shift began. Rushing home, an eerie sense of dread enveloped her as she approached the door, especially as faint footsteps echoed from within. When Jan reached her front door, she discovered both locks secured, obstructing her entry. Moving to the side patio, she found the sliding door ajar and the kitchen light on. As she stepped inside, a chilling sight greeted her. Photos of her two daughters had been removed from a shelf in the living room and ominously arranged on an ironing board. A surge of goosebumps washed over her. Heart racing, Jan dashed upstairs, and what she encountered left her in terror. Moments later, she called for help. 911, your emergency? 911, please send someone to my house. Someone come to my house. I think my daughter is dead. Oh my God. Ma'am, please just calm down. Oh my God, help me. Years later, in an interview with Cape Coral Police, Jan recounted the horrors of that fateful evening. I actually found my daughter and my friend. I had been out for the evening, and when I returned home there was an issue with my door and I couldn't get in through the front. So I went around to the sliding door and it was open. Upon entering, I felt an eerie sense of foreboding at that moment. In a chilling recollection, Jan Cornell described the harrowing moment she stepped into her home, believing it was being burglarized. As she ascended the stairs, the first sight that met her eyes was her daughter, lying lifeless in her bedroom. Out of the corner of her gaze, she caught a glimpse of Lisa, still on her bed, and her mind raced, trying to comprehend the nightmare unfolding before her. Panic surged through her as she dialed 911, her thoughts racing at 100 miles an hour. Each second felt like an eternity as she grappled with the horrific reality of the situation. With desperation in her heart, Jan attempted to resuscitate Robin, even as she felt the cold, stiff body beneath her hands. Deep down, she knew her daughter was gone, yet she clung to the hope for a miracle, willing herself to believe that somehow she could be saved. Frantically, Jan screamed for Lisa, unaware that her second daughter had also met a tragic fate. While on the phone with emergency services, she shouted for Lisa to respond, begging to understand what had happened in their home. When the police finally arrived, they stormed into the house, beginning their investigation amidst the chaos and confusion. Looking back, Jan reflected on the overwhelming shock that clouded her mind. Although she vividly remembered every detail, the reality of her daughter's deaths was nearly impossible for her to process. The police, arriving just moments after Jan's frantic call, walked into a scene that would haunt them forever. Both Lisa and Robin had been asphyxiated, leaving a grim tableau in their wake. Disturbingly, Robin's small body had been positioned in a disconcerting manner, The perpetrator had even taken the time to remove family photographs from a shelf, arranging them neatly on the ironing board. Jan sensed this was a deliberate act, meant to convey a message, though its meaning remained shrouded in mystery. Investigators uncovered that several personal items belonging to Lisa were missing, including her driver's license, credit cards, checkbook, and a brand-new wristwatch she had recently purchased. In an unsettling twist, a pair of unfamiliar white socks was discovered on a dining chair, adding another layer of intrigue to the case. A Toyota keychain, left behind on Jan's television, raised suspicions among detectives who believed it may have belonged to the suspect. They recovered a complete DNA profile from bodily fluids, alongside strands of blonde hair found at the scene. The evidence pointed towards a white male with type O blood. Detectives swabbed and interviewed numerous individuals, scoured traffic records in search of Toyota stops around the time of the crime, and pursued hundreds of tips, yet every lead led to a dead end. For the next 15 years, detectives meticulously reviewed evidence, leaving no stone unturned in their pursuit of justice. They interviewed everyone connected to John and Lisa, extending their inquiries to every resident in the 140-unit Courtyards North complex and the surrounding streets. Narrowing their focus, investigators identified 10 persons of interest, including a man reported as a peeping Tom who had relocated to Mississippi shortly after the tragedy. His ex-girlfriend revealed troubling behavior in the aftermath of the crime. Despite the suspicious timing of his departure, he was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. The case caught national attention when it aired twice on America's Most Wanted, first on January 21, 2006, and again on July 28, 2007. The exposure led to an influx of tips. In an effort to break the case, Cape Coral Police enlisted the help of retired NYPD detective Biddle Balin, who committed 6 months to unraveling the mystery. However, despite his relentless efforts, the case remained tragically unsolved. In 2009, Florida enacted a groundbreaking DNA collection law. This legislation allowed for the DNA sampling of anyone charged with a felony, expanding the reach for potential criminal suspects and ensuring that the innocent could be cleared from suspicion. Years later, Jan Cornell clung to the hope that justice would eventually be served. She resolutely declared, "I'm not going away. I'm not giving up." With determination, she vowed to the Cape Coral Police Department that she would never cease her search for the person who had harmed her loved ones. She had made a promise. As long as she drew breath, she would pursue the truth. Jan had fostered a strong relationship with law enforcement, continuously reminding them of her commitment. She firmly believed that someone within the community held crucial knowledge about the crime. She persisted, reaching out and appealing to the public, convinced that someone in the shadows had information that could illuminate the dark corners of this case. Every year, she pressed, urging those who knew to step forward, reminding them that silence only prolonged their suffering. "Time is running out," Jan implored. "Please come forward. Holding this information back only harms you." Her heart echoed with the belief that someone had the key to unlocking the truth. Jan urged anyone with knowledge to contact the police department, reiterating that the path to justice hinged on their courage to speak out. Despite the overwhelming sorrow, Jan endeavored to move forward with her life. She eventually married the boyfriend she had been with on the tragic night. Yet she chose to retain her identity, publicly identifying herself as Cornell. In 2016, in an effort to safeguard the community and gather new leads, the Cape Coral Police Department launched a focused social media campaign. Billboards emblazoned with the victims' faces appeared throughout Southwest Florida, a desperate plea for information. Then, in September 2016, more than 25 years after the heinous murders, the department held a press conference to share a significant breakthrough. Detectives had received a CODIS hit, DNA linked to a recent arrestee at the Lee County Jail. This DNA matched samples collected from the Cornell story case, reigniting hope within the investigation. Detectives immediately intensified their efforts, interviewing individuals recently arrested and securing a court warrant for further DNA testing. To confirm the initial CODIS match, the Athletes Lab, a key player in the investigation over the past 26 years, expedited the testing process. Detectives from the Investigative Services Bureau maintained close communication with the state attorney's office, propelled by the urgency of the discovery. At the conference, a palpable tension filled the air as the spokesperson announced, "Today, an arrest warrant has been served for Joseph Zieler, a white male born on April 15, 1962, for the murders of Robin Cornell and Lisa Story. We got him. As the news broke, Jan's heart swelled with a mix of relief and disbelief. "I've dreamt of this day, never knowing if it would come," she reflected. "Yet I never lost faith. We held on to the hope that someday we would uncover who killed my beautiful daughter and Susan's sister." She continued, "Miracles do exist. I believe in a higher power because I prayed for this day every single day for 26 years. I never let go of that hope." With raw emotion, Jan recounted the torment endured by her daughter and her friend. She expressed gratitude to the men in the room, acknowledging their unwavering support over the years, thankful they hadn't arrested her for her relentless pursuit of justice. With raw emotion, Jan Cornell recounted the horror of losing both her daughter and her friend. She poured her heart out, expressing gratitude towards the law enforcement officers present, acknowledging their patience over the 2.5 decades she had spent pursuing justice, even as she faced the shadows of her torment. As the sun rose on a new day, Jan Cornell expressed profound gratitude, her heart filled with a bittersweet happiness. She longed for her daughter, Robin Cornell, and her friend, Lisa Story, to finally rest in peace. Just a month prior to this moment, the dark shadow of a shocking revelation loomed over North Fort Myers. 54-year-old Joseph Zieler found himself embroiled in a violent confrontation with his eldest son, an argument that escalated dangerously. In a moment of rage, he fired a pellet gun, injuring his son and landing himself in jail on charges of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. This second-degree felony triggered a mandatory DNA swab under the 2009 DNA collection law, setting in motion a chain of harrowing events. The moment the Florida Department of Law Enforcement received Ziegler's DNA results, they alerted the Cape Coral Police. His DNA matched a profile in the CODIS database, leading investigators to a chilling connection to the unsolved Cornell Story murders from decades earlier. At the time of the horrific double homicide, Zieler was merely 28 years old. Now, decades later, he faced grave charges: 2 counts of sexual battery, 1 count of burglary, and 2 counts of first-degree murder. Held without bail, Zieler awaited trial with the ominous specter of the death penalty hanging over him. The day after his arrest, he made his initial court appearance for the murder charges. However, the road to justice was fraught with procedural hurdles, legal maneuvers, and logistical challenges typical of complex, decades-old cases. 6 long years would pass before the trial against Joseph Zieler finally commenced. Jury selection began on a tense morning, as the courtroom filled with the weight of history. 2 lives brutally taken more than 30 years ago. Prosecutors, fueled by newfound evidence, were resolute in their belief that they had a compelling case for conviction, and they sought the ultimate punishment. They presented damning evidence. Body fluids discovered on the bedsheet where young Robin had been found matched Ziegler's DNA with an astonishing probability of over 1 in 700 billion. Furthermore, testimony from Ziegler's longtime girlfriend added a disturbing layer to the case, revealing intimate details that mirrored the crime scene. Having started dating Zieler in the same month as the murders, she ended their relationship following his arrest. When questioned about Ziegler's intimate preferences, her description aligned eerily with the position in which Robin was discovered. Moreover, she challenged Ziegler's claims of memory loss from a motorcycle accident, asserting that she had never witnessed any such issues throughout their 26-year relationship. Ziegler's defense team prepared to counter the overwhelming evidence. They aimed to challenge the DNA findings, propose an alternative suspect, and assert that Zieler had been out of town during the grisly crimes. As the courtroom drama unfolded, opening arguments commenced on May 16, 2023, 1 month after the pivotal CODIS hit. In a striking declaration, a witness stated that throughout her 26-year relationship with Joseph Zieler, she had never encountered any troubling behavior. Ziegler's defense team was prepared to mount a robust challenge, disputing the DNA evidence, suggesting alternative suspects, and asserting that he was out of town during the time of the crimes. The courtroom buzzed with tension as opening arguments commenced on May 16, 2023, just 1 month prior to the critical CODIS hit. Zieler had been apprehended on an unrelated charge, leading to a DNA swab that would ultimately unravel the threads of his alibi. That DNA, once entered into the CODIS database, provided the crucial match that linked him to the horrific murders. At the time of the crimes, he resided in Cape Coral, where he was employed at Marine Concepts, a location alarmingly close to Jan Cornell's home. In the wake of the CODIS breakthrough in September 2016, the Cape Coral Police Department summoned Joseph Zieler for questioning. From the outset, his demeanor was evasive, shrouded in a veil of denial. Zieler recounted a motorcycle accident from 1998, claiming it robbed him of his memories from the 8 years preceding the crash. He feigned ignorance about his own parents and even questioned whether he had ever visited Cape Coral. In his desperate narrative, Zieler painted himself as a victim of circumstance, asserting that he was nearly incapacitated post-accident. He insisted that his girlfriend, Bonnie, had to care for him as he struggled to navigate life, portraying himself as a man stripped of his identity. When confronted with the chilling realities of the murders, Joseph Zieler feigned ignorance. He claimed to have no memory of the victims or the locations involved. Yet, a stark contrast emerged in a statement he provided to law enforcement in August, following his arrest for an unrelated crime. In this earlier account, Zieler shared details that painted a different picture. He recounted his time working in Cape Coral, revealing he had been with his girlfriend Bonnie for nearly 26 years. He even recalled the precise moment he welcomed his son into the world in 1991, demonstrating an unsettling familiarity with his past. The prosecution would later play recordings of phone calls between Zieler and Bonnie, where he meticulously instructed her on how to secure a bondsman, manage their home as collateral, and even how to assume power of attorney over his affairs. This was not the behavior of a man claiming to be lost in memory. There appeared to be two distinct versions of Joseph Zieler, separated by the revelation of the murders. One was a man seemingly unaware, while the other was a calculated individual fully capable of navigating his own affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my privilege to stand before you today as the representative for Mr. Zieler alongside Mr. Hollander. My opening statements will be brief, for the burden of proof lies squarely on the state's shoulders in this case. We are not required to disprove anything. Mr. Zieler has the right to testify if he chooses, but should he decide against it, you must not hold that against him. This is his constitutional right, one you were assured you would not consider as you weigh the evidence. Ultimately, the choice to testify rests with him, and we will address that once the state has rested its case. During their investigation, the Cape Coral Police Department meticulously interviewed hundreds of individuals, collecting DNA and hair samples from many. However, one glaring omission stands out. They did not question Joseph Zieler. For 26 years, he was not considered a suspect. It wasn't until much later that he was finally placed on their radar. At the time, Cornell, Robin's mother, could provide little insight into Zieler, as he was essentially a ghost in the eyes of law enforcement. As the trial progressed, the jury would encounter a wealth of physical evidence. The defense acknowledged some of it had been consumed in testing, yet numerous hair samples were recovered from the apartment, alongside fingerprints and footprints, all suggesting that many had crossed the threshold of that crime scene. On the day the trial commenced, Cornell took the stand, confronting the haunting memories of that tragic night 3 decades prior. As she examined crime scene photos and relived the trauma, she recounted the moment she entered the room where her daughter lay. Overcome with grief, she described the instantaneous recognition of death, touching her cold daughter and crying out her name. When asked if she understood her daughter was dead, she confirmed with a heavy heart. In desperation, she attempted to revive Robin, performing CPR to bring her back from the brink. The defense questioned her actions, seeking clarity on the position of Robin's body. Jan confirmed that she had moved her daughter, placing her on her back before beginning the resuscitation efforts. The courtroom hung on every word as Jan recalled the trauma of that night, revealing the depth of her anguish and the desperate hope that had driven her to act in those harrowing moments. Yes, she had performed CPR, with the hope of reviving her beloved daughter, but the cold reality had already set in. During the trial, a pivotal moment arose when a crucial question was posed about the positioning of the victim's body. Zieler admitted to moving her, confirming that he had placed her on her back. When pressed further, he conceded that he had indeed attempted CPR, an act that would haunt the proceedings. As the frantic moments of CPR unfolded, the witness noted a troubling sign. The victim, Robin Cornell, displayed heavy congestion, suggesting she had been crying. The source of that congestion remained a mystery, but as he breathed into her, he heard the unmistakable sound of her lungs aspirating, a grim realization dawning upon him. She was dead. Amidst this chaos, he was simultaneously calling for help from 911. When asked if he had made contact with the emergency services, he confirmed that he had indeed reached out. The witness stayed by Robin's side, refusing to leave until the police arrived. During the cross-examination of Joseph Zieler, the prosecution raised pointed questions regarding letters he had sent to John Cornell a year prior, letters that would later serve as evidence in witness intimidation charges against him. The first line of one such letter boldly declared, "The letter is coming," penned by Joseph Adam Zieler himself. The prosecutor pressed for further details, asking about a series of numbers that followed. Zieler revealed his ID number, 47492/835715, a stark reminder of his incarceration. He went on to confirm that the letter bore the address of the Lee County Jail, where he was confined, detailing the location with precision. When asked to whom the letter was addressed, Zieler named J.G. Batiste and family, prompting a deeper inquiry into the identity of this family member. He admitted that he believed J.G. Batiste referred to Jenny Gal Batiste, Robin's sister, showing a tangled connection to the victim's family. Zieler hesitated, then confessed he intended to reach out to the whole Batiste family, revealing a desperate attempt to connect amidst the turmoil. Within that particular letter, he professed his innocence, claiming it was a relative of his who had committed the murder, a startling admission that painted a picture of an individual scrambling to deflect blame. Zieler explained his actions, revealing a profound sense of urgency. He felt unheard, stating plainly that he was trying to defend himself because no one seemed to listen. He confirmed, under scrutiny, that he had indeed claimed a relative was responsible for the crime. When pressed further, the prosecutor sought clarity on whether he had disclosed intimate details about his past with Jan Cornell and Leanne Deller, which he confirmed with a chilling nod. Zieler elaborated that he believed his DNA was present in the condominium because he had slept with both Jan Cornell and Leanne Deller. His assertion was that the only explanation for his DNA being found there was their negligence in maintaining cleanliness. He acknowledged the possibility of having intimacy with both women, recalling that he was in the area during December of '89. This admission painted a vivid, if troubling, picture of his connection to the victims. Zieler speculated that if his DNA was indeed recovered from the condo, it had to be from that time, suggesting a timeline that would extend back to December. The prosecutor pressed, highlighting contradictions in Ziegler's previous statements about never having been in the condominium. Under mounting pressure, he speculated again, stating that his DNA could only have resulted from encounters with Jan Cornell and Leanne Deller. The prosecutor sought to clarify the timeline, probing about the potential viability of DNA 5 months later, to which Zieler maintained his position, attributing the persistence of his DNA to the negligence of the women involved. In a moment of dark humor, he remarked that the only reason his DNA remained was that they were pigs who did not wash their sheets, a statement that underscored the bizarre twist of his narrative. With certainty, he declared, "Exactly! You know that!" as he seemingly relished the absurdity of his defense, oblivious to the gravity of the situation he faced. In a moment of frustration, Joseph Zieler lashed out, referring to law enforcement in a derogatory manner. He asserted they were pigs who merely washed their sheets as he sat in jail, awaiting charges related to a horrific crime. During the tense proceedings, Zieler attempted to justify his actions, claiming he felt unheard. He had sent a message meant for an 11-year-old boy, Robin Cornell, whose tragic murder had captured the public's attention as he tried to defend himself against the accusations flying around him. In a formal setting, the prosecutor interrupted Zieler, instructing him to wait for questions instead of speaking freely. The atmosphere grew thick with tension as an exhibit was introduced, further unraveling the web of Ziegler's correspondence. The judge moved to admit Exhibit 311, a piece of evidence that was crucial to the case. Ziegler's eyes darted around, knowing the implications of what was about to unfold. On the second page of this exhibit, an envelope addressed to John Cornell from Joseph Zieler was unveiled. The prosecutor pressed Zieler, asking if he had indeed authored this letter, to which Zieler reluctantly acknowledged his handwriting. With mounting pressure, the prosecutor directed Ziegler's attention to a specific statement within the letter, asking him to clarify the implications of his words directed at Jan Cornell. Zieler hesitated, claiming he couldn't answer without seeing the letter. The prosecutor pressed on, reading aloud a provocative line from the correspondence. Ziegler's demeanor shifted as he faced the gravity of his own words, which hinted at a disturbing intimacy. Zieler feigned confusion, denying the presence of Jan Cornell's name in the letter. The prosecutor, undeterred, rephrased the question, seeking clarity on whom Zieler had addressed in that incriminating statement. Zieler was caught off guard, fumbling for an answer. He was pressed to clarify if there were others within the Cornell family he had been involved with, but he was interrupted, unable to gather his thoughts in the heated exchange. The prosecutor, maintaining composure, urged Zieler to answer openly. He sought to understand Ziegler's intentions behind the letter, leading to a revealing admission about his desire to retest DNA evidence that he claimed did not contain his genetic material. Ziegler's demeanor shifted again as he confirmed he had been present for the lengthy proceedings, forcing him to confront the retesting of crucial DNA evidence that could determine his fate. He recalled the testimony regarding the retesting of DNA samples, acknowledging the process had occurred, but his defense was shaky as he learned the results had not favored him. The prosecutor pressed the fact that the forensic lab had sided with the prosecution, asserting Jan Cornell had been excluded from the DNA evidence. Ziegler's defiance emerged as he voiced his disbelief in the findings. Zieler insisted on the need for further testing, desperate to overturn what he perceived as a grave miscarriage of justice. He was consumed by the thought that his name was wrongly tied to this heinous crime. The prosecutor then guided Zieler to the 4th page of the exhibit, directing him to another pointed statement where Zieler had threatened to drag the Cornell family through the legal system if they allowed the wrong man to be convicted out of spite. Ziegler's words echoed ominously as he acknowledged writing that line, asserting his claim of innocence. He warned that he would not relent until the truth was revealed, regardless of the toll it would take on those involved. Ziegler's resolve came to light as he revealed his correspondence, including a statement he had written during his lengthy appeals that reached the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. He passionately declared his innocence, vowing to prove it, no matter how many years it might take, raising the haunting question of whether he truly wanted to spend the rest of his life entangled in a relentless legal battle. In a tense exchange, Joseph Zieler found himself cornered. He admitted to writing a threatening note directed at Ms. Cornell stating that her accusations of rape and murder against him had driven him to this point. He protested, arguing that the name-calling was mutual. While she labeled him a rapist and a murderer, he retorted by calling her a pig for not washing her sheets. Ziegler's words were a feeble attempt to deflect the gravity of the situation he found himself in. As the court proceedings unfolded, disturbing images of the crime surfaced. The jury was faced with the haunting memory of the 11-year-old victim, whose blonde hair was a grim reminder of the horrific events. The judge swiftly intervened, reprimanding Zieler for attempting to introduce evidence that had not been previously presented. He made it clear that this behavior was unacceptable, reminding Zieler that he was not allowed to present a narrative or personal beliefs, as he had made himself a witness in his own trial. The judge asked if Zieler understood the implications of his actions. Zieler responded affirmatively, though the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The judge pressed further, asking Ziegler's counsel if they had discussed the potential for contempt if Zieler continued to misbehave. The defense attorney confirmed they had only spoken about Ziegler's testimony. The judge issued a stark warning, stating that if Zieler persisted in this manner, contempt proceedings would be initiated. Zieler understood the severity of the situation, nodding in acknowledgement. The courtroom fell silent as the jury was called back in. Prosecutor Stephanie Russell delivered her closing arguments, emphasizing the straightforward nature of the case. The DNA evidence, she argued, pointed directly to Joseph Zieler as the murderer. In a fierce counter, defense attorney Lee Hollander suggested that the presence of blonde hair at the crime scene indicated a personal motive, given that neither Jan nor Zieler had any known connection prior to the murders. On May 18, 2023, after hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict in the Circuit Court of the 20th Judicial Circuit in Fort Lee County, Florida. The State of Florida versus Jonah Joseph Adam Zieler, case number 16, CF 455. The jury found Zieler guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Robin Cornell. Furthermore, they confirmed his guilt for the first-degree murder of Lisa Story. The verdict was signed on May 18, 2023, by the foreperson. The courtroom braced for any requests from the defense. The judge addressed the jury, instructing them to listen carefully as he reviewed their juror numbers and posed the same critical question to each member. 5 weeks later, after the jury had voted by a 10-2 margin to recommend death for Joseph Zieler, all parties returned to court for the judge's ruling. However, just hours before the decision, Zieler signaled to his public defender, indicating he had something private he wished to share. The court, having reviewed other capital cases, concluded that the death penalty was a proportionate sentence in this instance. Thus, the court ordered that Joseph Adam Zieler would forfeit his right to live, sentencing him to death for the murders of Robin Cornell and Lisa Story. The weight of the verdict hung heavily in the air, marking a dark chapter in the pursuit of justice. The court, with a solemnity that echoed through the room, announced the sentence for Joseph Zieler. He was remanded to the custody of the State of Florida Department of Corrections for the execution of his sentence, as dictated by law. The gravity of the moment was palpable, underscoring the weight of justice. The judge then proceeded to inform the courtroom that this conviction and sentence would undergo an automatic review by the Florida Supreme Court. There was a moment of silence as the judge sought objections from both the state and the defense, but none were raised. The air was thick with the finality of the proceedings. With a firm voice, the judge addressed Zieler directly, stating that the sentence and judgment had been rendered. He was instructed to step aside for fingerprinting, marking the transition from freedom to confinement as he was remanded to the sheriff for transport to the Department of Corrections. In a moment of gratitude that resonated with those present, a voice broke through the somber atmosphere. It was a heartfelt acknowledgement of the dedication, compassion, and hard work that had brought the case to its resolution. The speaker emphasized that without such commitment, the gathering would not have been possible. The reality of justice was laid bare, far removed from the dramatized versions depicted on television. Hearing the words confirming that justice for Robin and Lisa had finally been served was a moment of profound relief and validation. The speaker conveyed that the perpetrator had received the utmost punishment the state could impose, the death penalty. Zieler would never taste freedom again, nor would he pose a threat to anyone else. For this, an overwhelming sense of gratitude washed over those who had fought for justice. Expressing appreciation, the speaker highlighted the unwavering support of the dedicated team that stood by them through dark times. They were thanked for allowing a voice to emerge, one that spoke for both a daughter and a friend lost to an unspeakable evil. Pride emanated from the speaker as they affirmed their love for Robin and Lisa, vowing that their memories would never fade. They lamented the cruelty of fate that had stolen their lives too soon, recognizing the injustice that had plagued their existence. Now, however, there was a sense of peace. The speaker expressed a wish to let Robin and Lisa rest, extending gratitude to everyone involved, particularly the Cape Coral Police Department and the diligent individuals who had persevered through the case's complexities. Thanks were also directed towards the prosecution team, the dedicated administrators, and the investigators who had tirelessly pursued justice day after day, year after year. They had held on to hope, and the speaker felt profound gratitude for a system that had ultimately delivered. Expressions of appreciation flowed for all who had shown support throughout this arduous journey. Words fell short of conveying the gratitude felt by the speaker, who hoped that both Lisa and Robin could now find peace. For 26 long years, Jan Cornell had carried the unbearable burden of her daughter Robin's and her friend Lisa's unresolved murders. Each day since that fateful night in 1990, her life was consumed by an unyielding grief intertwined with an insatiable drive for justice. Jan's unwavering love for her daughter fueled her tenacity as she clung to every shred of hope, particularly as advancements in forensic technology began to emerge. When the moment came that the justice system apprehended Joseph Zieler, tried him, convicted him, and finally sentenced him, it was not merely a resolution, but a flicker of restored faith for those who had long awaited justice. This verdict illuminated the dark past and offered a small measure of solace to those who had endured the long fight for closure.